Crush them all!
2 years after creating Pac-Man, Toru Iwatani wanted to make his next big game, Pole Position. While not quite to the same extent as Pac-Man, it was still a massive success, becoming the biggest game in 1983, and overall just a genre-defining racing game. As was pretty common for anything that got so popular during the time, it got a cartoon adaptation. Now, for those who are not familiar with it, Pole Position doesn't really have any story, or characters, or really any of the things that you need for a TV show, and that's perfectly fine for what it is. It's a game about driving cars. It doesn't really need a complex plot. But it does become a bit of an issue when you're trying to make a TV show, because right off the bat, you're not doing this because of any creative reasons, but because of the brand name. And you know what? Sometimes it's necessary. Uwe Boll's entire career has been using brand names so he can make the films that he wants to make. So, is it a shameless cash grab? Well, let's find out. Don't worry, you're not going to have to wait very long. Instead of just starting off with a theme song like most shows do, it actually opens up a little teaser that gives you a little taste about what the episode's going to be about. And this is actually really clever because it's almost like clickbait, because it shows you just the cool part of the episode. Like episode 2 shows like a boulder rolling down a hill about to crush this dude to death in a house. And you're like, oh, I want to see that dude get killed. So you're like, okay, I'm going to watch this episode. Even if I find the rest of the episode boring, I don't care. I'll still watch it because I want to see what happens with that. Unfortunately, the intro itself is not quite so original. It's very G.I. Joe. And hey, wait a minute. No. That looks a little bit like Speed Racer. Did you just change the colors a little bit? We're like, hey, that'll be our new character. You can't do that. I can't take Superman, make him green, and change his S a little bit and be like, hey, this is my new OC. Please do not steal. His name is Strong Boy. If I did that, I'd get a... hey, wait a minute. I need to go deal with this. Oh, hey, Warner Brother. Oh, you're here to sue me for $10 million. And I'm going to copyright jail? Well, that doesn't seem very fair to me, but I mean, I guess it's a law. Now, that on its own is not enough to say this is like a knockoff of Speed Racer, because it's just a helmet and a mascot, and something that's been in racing culture even before Speed Racer. However, in addition, they copy like the whole little kid who doesn't really do anything, but they're always around with like the little animal who's like does a lot of human things and just is there to be the annoying little mascot. No, wait a minute. That car has a face. Oh, let me guess. It talks.
Listen now, Ted. I'm not really sure my hyperphone is working very well.
Yep, you know, just like Knight Rider. Because of course, they couldn't just copy a couple things, they gotta copy everything. And you've probably actually heard that voice, even if you don't recognize it, because it is none other than Melvin Franklin. Yeah, you probably don't know who that is. I didn't. He was part of the Temptations. They sung My Girl. I don't know how or why he got involved. As far as I can tell, this is literally the only time in his entire life he did voice acting. But sure, why not? He's the only real notable voice actor in this, and it kind of shows. However, one of the main characters, Dan, is actually voiced by David Coburn, who later went on to do Captain Planet. Though this is one of his first roles, and it really shows. Visually speaking, the show is okay looking. It's really bland looking most of the time, but sometimes there's a little bit of visual flair, and sometimes the animation is pretty decent. And unfortunately, those are a lot more rare compared to the really awful parts, like one part where these characters are driving their cars, and they very clearly phase through each other. Now, visually speaking, that lack of coherence is probably the biggest issue, because it's not just the animation, which I could probably overlook, but even the art itself is inconsistent. Like, in some scenes, the little mascot character, Kuma, will be fairly big, like a dog size, and other times it'll be fairly tiny. Story-wise, the show probably isn't what you'd expect. It's definitely good guys versus bad guys, but the bad guys' goals rarely relates to racing. Sometimes it does, but only vaguely. The first episode is a good example of this. So if you were like me, you're probably expecting it to be like an introductory episode where it kind of like shows the main characters racing, and then like the bad guys who are like rival racers show up. But no, and this is not a joke. The first episode is about corporate espionage and honeypotting. So the villains are this guy.
This will be like taking candy from a baby.
Which is fine by me.
Who hired this other guy to seduce the main female character.
Do you think a world-class stunt driver would have time for dinner tonight? Well, how about it? Dinner tonight?
So that they can steal some codes to destroy the main character's company.
Dan, Tess,
It appears as if someone has tapped into our computer system and stolen the command codes to the pole position cars. All the information needed to destroy our entire computer system is stored in the memory banks of Rhodey and Wheels. If our enemies obtain this information, pole position would cease to exist. Tess, I want you to change the command code.
But it turns out Super Seducer was actually working for the good guy company, and this whole thing was a ruse to trick the villains into stealing the main character's codes, and when they enter the codes, it would actually destroy the villains group's computers. Why would you do that? I don't know who any of these characters are. I don't know what these corporations are. None of this means anything to me, and I think this episode wasn't even meant to be a first episode, because the way they write it makes it seem like he was already known as a good guy before this, and it seems like the beginning is supposed to be like, oh, why is he working with a bad guy? What's happening with that? But this is the first time I've seen him. I don't know that he's supposed to be a good guy. His introductory is him working with the villain, so I assume he's just a villain. I have no context for this character. This episode should have been later on. You could have done literally any of the other episodes first, and it would have made more sense. Now, if you thought the first episode had a pretty weird plot, don't worry. Episode 2 just takes it up a notch, because, hey, whoa, what is going on with his body? His body's inflating, and inflating. What is going on? What is happening? And that's just you. That's just the same guy as before. That's not a different person. Why is she grabbing your face? She have like the hot storm? What's going on with your neck? Dude, stop. Please. This is too much all at once for me to handle. Oh my god. Let's play that again and see what he actually said.
This is Dr. Michael Hastings. He's just developed a vaccine that's 100% effective against all forms of biological warfare.
We upgraded from corporate espionage to biological warfare in our kids' cartoon about racing talking cars. Why? I'm into it, don't get me wrong. But why? When the characters get there to try and get the vaccine, it turns out someone set the building on fire to try and murder the guy.
What's going on?
Looks like arson.
A lot of very challenging subjects for a kids show. I'm into it, don't get me wrong. Maybe the show was made by somebody that wanted to make like an adult political thriller, but couldn't get the resources, so they put all their ideas in the show. I don't think so, but maybe. And then the girls, along with the doctor, get abducted by the main villain, who turns out to be the janitor. But before that, he sets up this whole trap, so when he goes to go rescue them, this boulder comes down a hill and like crushes the house along with them. Next few episodes are pretty typical kid show stuff, though. Episode 5 at least is about racing. It's the only episode in the series about racing. Although even then, it actually has some weird motivation, because the villain, instead of just wanting to win the race, he's trying to smuggle out a microchip to take it to another country. Because, of course, everything in this series is like weirdly politically charged. I'm okay with it, but it's still weird. Episode 7 is also in that vein, though at least has kind of a fun twist, because it turns out on the eyebrow of Thomas Jefferson on Mount Rushmore, there is a golden totem pole that was planted there after someone stole it from a local museum. Why? Why would you plant that there? And apparently it's been sitting there for 5 years. I mean, sure. That's weird, but sure. Episode 8 is also decently fun. It's about this like magician who kidnaps all these like families, and he has like the children work in this weird little town, and he like mind controls the adults to work and do like other proper stuff for him. It's a decently fun episode. It's not bad. Beyond like the plot points being kind of weird and funny, it's not really that interesting a show. It's pretty boring, and it's just not very well made. Like the dialogue is not very good and doesn't really make sense a lot of the time. Like there will be times where a character will say something that does not make any sense based off what actually happened. Like in the first episode, a character drives into like the water, and all the characters act like he got wet, but you stay dry inside the car.
Have you heard the one about the soaking wet drive?
Have a nice swim, Dan.
No, Kuma. Don't you think I'm wet enough?
There's a few other instances like this. Like later on, they're driving on this water, and the girl character hits the mine, but later on they keep referencing it as he hit the mine.
See, I was driving my car in the ocean when I suddenly hit a mine.
Just really sloppy writing, and there's just a lot of like insults and comebacks and stuff that don't make a whole lot of sense.
Well, that's that.
Yeah, right. See you around.
Not if we see you first.
That's nothing that you just said. That's just this whole show. It's just kind of lame and inoffensive and boring. Don't watch it.